Today I'm going to talk about public education, and what I have to say may be shocking. It certainly is still shocking to me. You need to know I say this as a third-generation American who owes my piece of the American dream to a public education system that helped my family move up the economic ladder from really humble beginnings. Today I have the honor of leading a national nonprofit that works with public educators across the country, operating dropout prevention and graduation promotion programs in partnership with teachers and principals and parents in 2,400 public schools. So it pains me as a deep believer and unabashed supporter of public education to say that today's public schools simply aren't designed for the majority of students in the classroom. Bit by bit, over the years, the socioeconomic makeup of our student population has shifted dramatically, while the way schools operate, the way they're designed, has barely budged. If you want to see how the face of public education has changed, really there's just one number you need to know: 51%. 51% of students in the classroom today are on free and reduced price lunch. In 1989, that number was less than 32%. Now, the National School Lunch Program is generally the way we determine low-income rates for public schools. So what this number tells us, this 51%, is that the majority of kids in school are functionally poor. And there's a brutal fact. Schools were never designed to manage that magnitude of poverty in the classroom. In fact, schools were designed as we as a nation transitioned from an agrarian-based economy to an industrial-based economy, where bustling factories could pay middle-class wages for semi-skilled labor, enabling one parent to focus on breadwinning and the other on child development. The division of labor really was what characterized the industrial age, and that absolutely translated into how we designed public schools. Over here, you had families with the time and the resources to focus on the child development side of the equation. And over here, you had schools with expert teachers and adults focused on the academic side of the equation. And this part, the school part, it worked precisely because this part, the family part, was focused on building grit and resilience and persistence and self-regulation. All these critically important skills we know today as non-cognitive skills or social-emotional learning. 120 years later, this part, the school part, it's still slugging away at the academic side of the equation. But there's been a tremendous shift in the family. The division of labor within the family in a post-industrial economy means that both parents have to work. And if you're in a single family, time and resources are in rather short supply. Nearly 25 million children in America live in single-parent families, meaning the economic resources and that precious family time are really very scarce. So we should not be surprised that millions upon millions of young people every day come to school with underdeveloped non-cognitive skills. Quite frankly, that just doesn't work. Dropping off a poor kid at a traditionally designed public school and expecting her to get a complete education is a little bit like dropping off at a department store and expecting her to get a week's worth of groceries. Both places really have great stuff. They just don't meet the basic needs of our child in order for her to be successful. Now, school educators, they often say, hey, we are not in the child development business. But given the shift in the socioeconomic makeup of our student body, we as a nation have to ask, well, then exactly whose business is it? You see, none of us are born with these non-cognitive skills. We learn them over the course of our life through really critical, important developmental experiences and examples, and most importantly, through a set of developmental relationships with caring adults who coach us and mentor us, who will chastise us, and they will believe in us. Those of us who grew up in a middle-class background, we're lucky. We probably were completely unaware of the range of developmental experiences and adults that made up our life. That coach at gymnastics or soccer practice who helped us bust through when we fell down or lost a game, building grit and resilience. That camp counselor who helped us for the first time negotiate independence from our family and build a whole new set of relationships with peers. That back-breaking job bussing tables at the corner restaurant. You had a boss who was probably watching if you were showing up on time or if you were slacking off. Here's the thing, and really here's the tragedy. poor kids in America have fundamentally fewer access to these critically important developmental experiences and caring adults who are so essential to building these non-cognitive skills. If you're a single dad working 2 jobs, you don't have time to drop off Dan at soccer practice. You don't have extra resources for him to be able to go to summer camp. And Dan can't take that summer after-school job because he's got to come home after school to take care of his younger siblings while you work your second shift. So this brings me back to the critical number, 51%. 51% of school-age children are functionally poor. When the majority of kids in the classroom lack the critical non-academic experience and non-cognitive skills necessary for them to be successful in school, schools are overwhelmed. Regardless of how extraordinary the teacher is, how innovative you've been in bringing in technology, schools can't keep all students on track when so many are in need of remediation for their non-cognitive skills. So we shouldn't be surprised that every year we lose 1 million young people who drop out of school. They are disproportionate kids who come from low-income families. So that means they're going to perpetuate a cycle of poverty in their life. A cycle of poverty which means they'll be disproportionately vulnerable to homelessness and hunger, to being unemployed or underemployed, and a much higher probability of being incarcerated. Costs that these kids should not have to bear, and we as a society can no longer afford. So I've painted a pretty grim picture, and I hope shocking. But I'm here today to talk about how we can change the picture of education by changing our assumptions about what public schools can and should do. So let's go back to our metaphor of dropping off a kid and expecting to get a week's worth of groceries. Now, work with me here. Imagine that this school or network of schools, or this network of department stores has been redesigned. We've gone out and we found a whole group of farmers to come in and share their wares. And we set up a farmer's market. Over here you've got great fresh milk and cheese and yogurt, wonderful, glorious, fresh produce, free-range beef in the back, and these wonderful, wonderful breads and baked goods. All these resources were actually in the community, but they weren't connected to our shopper, so she rarely had access to them. Now imagine we have actually a nutritionist on staff who helps with menu planning. There's actually food stations around the store that help you actually see how to make these nutritious meals. But most importantly, there is a personal shopper, a highly trained professional shopper every day, making sure the clients who come through the door get the right mix of products and services. What I've just described in a very simple way is a school reform strategy that goes by a number of different names: integrated student supports, community schools, wraparound services. In this model, schools serve as a central distribution point for a whole range of community resources, and it's all orchestrated by a caring adult who's integrated into the very design of how the school operates, ensuring non-academic needs are being met. At communities and schools, we call this person a site coordinator. He's this wonderful mix of love and highly trained professionalism, and he builds a caring relationship with kids, trust, and with teachers and principals and community resources. He then builds an individual school development plan for the student, and then reaches out into the community, finding existing community resources, and connects them to the kid. What kinds of resources are we talking about? Mentoring and tutoring, after-school programming, food banks, college access programs, job shadowing, community service opportunities. The fact is, in America, there are incredible resources throughout communities, but they're just disconnected from the people that need them in the places that they need them. Primarily because our schools are set up as academic silos. And quite frankly, our social service sector is a maze of bureaucracy and paperwork and organizational complexity. The goal of this model, this integrated student service model, is to break down the silos and simplify the maze, unifying a set of resources into the building to make school a holistic development center where academic and non-academic needs are being met. I liken this a little bit to penicillin because of this. Last year, Child Trends issued a wonderful report and said there is an incredible set of strategies going out there, and we want to know more about it. And so they said, community school, tell us a little bit about the work you do. How much does it cost to actually do this? They said, actually, it's about $160 per student per year to redesign schools, to integrate these resources. And your graduation rate among your eligible seniors, how many is that? 91% of CIS's eligible seniors graduate from high school. So they began to look at other programs. We're not the only ones out there. There are lots. And they issued a report last year after analyzing mountains of data from across the United States. And they said, you know, this strategy is capable of lowering dropout rates and improving graduation rates. It does it in elementary, middle, and high schools, in urban, rural, and suburban environments. But most importantly, it is effective with low-income children who come to school with underdeveloped non-cognitive skills. This integrated student service strategy can unify academic and non-academic service. So what stands before us is a challenge to redesign public education. I've talked a lot about theory and numbers. I'd love to end with a story. Remember when I was saying how important these developmental experiences are of having a job that build grit and resilience and time management? Poor kids often don't have access to critical resources like a car or a social network to get those jobs or have those experiences. That was certainly the case for Talitha Holly, who found herself on a bus traveling from New Orleans to Houston in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. After spending a horrific week in the Superdome, she and her family, she landed in Houston with one suitcase and a teddy bear. But as luck would have it, she found herself at a new high school, a high school that had been redesigned to meet her both academic and non-academic needs. At Sharpstown High School in Houston, Communities and Schools ran a set of wonderful programs for the 300 displaced students whose lives had been ripped apart by the hurricane. There, Talitha was matched with tutors and mentors and social supports that wrapped her and her family in a community of love and support. The center of that was the Community and Schools site coordinator, Donna Watkins, who partnered with Talitha and her family, building a trusting relationship, and together they looked for every developmental opportunity so Talitha would have the skills that she needed to be successful in life. One such opportunity presented itself in Talitha's junior year when Representative Al Green offered for applications for the Congressional Page Program. Now, Talitha is one of these people, she's a no-brainer. She's smart and bright and got that wonderful sense of, I can make stuff happen. But like many poor kids, she lacked a whole range of resources that would enable her to take advantage of this opportunity. So Donna leaps into action. She sits down with Talitha, strategizes on the application process, thinks through a compelling essay, brings in coaches to build her interview skills. When Talitha was awarded the opportunity to take the Congressional Page Program, Donna leaps into action, mobilizes community resources, puts together a fund so Talitha has airfare to get up to Washington and living expenses while she's here. She helped her secure a professional wardrobe and even took her to a fancy business lunch so Talitha could manage the power lunches here in Washington well. So needless to say, with all this care and love and support and belief in her, Talitha absolutely flourished. While here in Washington, she had the opportunity to go to Howard University. And for the first time, she began to imagine she could go to college, being the first in her family. A few weeks ago, I had the honor of attending Howard University's commencement ceremony, where Talitha graduated with a 3.2 in political science and community development. Exactly. It was a wonderful moment and painful at the same time to see that by dint of luck, Talitha had landed at a school that had been redesigned to meet both her academic and her non-academic needs. Today, I'm here to make a clarion call to all of us to say that we can't afford not to redesign public education when so many of our young people, the majority, are in need of both academic and non-academic supports. We know it's not that expensive. $160 per student per year relative to the $31,000 we're willing to pay to incarcerate an adult? Really? So, whether you're a policymaker or a parent, a school board member, a mayor, a church leader, a community volunteer, we all together have to engage communities and schools to create this holistic environment where the Talitha Hollies of the world can be unleashed. They are the majority of our students today in public education. Thank you very much.